Welcome to today's class, lecture, workshop, Uncover Your Past Lives and Heal Yourself. My name is Tracy Kennedy, and this is Celeste Appel, and we are both students at the Inarius Academy of Science. We have been students for many, many years. We volunteer for the Academy, and we also help facilitate many of the ongoing classes in past life therapy. And we have both been students for, over 25 years. So it's something that we hold near and dear to our heart because we have seen how many positive changes, not only ourselves, but all the students who take the study of past life therapy to heart and really try to apply the principles and have seen tremendous positive changes in their lives as a result. So how many of you think that you have lived one or more past lives? Just about everyone. I would think you would be here. You wouldn't be here if you hadn't already thought that. How many of you have actually seen one or more past lives that you know that you've lived? Okay, several of you. Well, what we're going to talk about today is what past life therapy is, how it came about, and what are some of the tools that we use to discover our past lives. And then we're also going to share some personal examples because I think we are not teachers per se, but we are students and hopefully want to serve as examples of how the science of life has helped us. So as I mentioned, we're from the Inarius Academy of Science, and what Inarius is, it is on a third dimensional level, it is a non-profit educational foundation. It is not a religion, it is an interdimensional science. And it was founded quite a while ago in 1954 by two very advanced, we call them cosmic visionaries. Their Earth names were Ruth and Ernest Norman, but we know them as the moderator because he moderated information coming from a much higher frequency, the higher celestial planes. And Ruth Norman we knew as Uriel, which was her spiritual name. And they brought the science in book form. We have over 100 books in print. We have DVDs, we have CDs, we have MP3s, MP4s, over 100 DVDs, shows available. So we have quite an extensive curriculum that covers a variety of subjects, but first and foremost is about understanding ourselves as energy beings. And as we all know, energy cannot be destroyed, it can only be changed. So what that means is as individual souls, we carry a whole Akashic record of all these life experiences that we've had in many, many previous lifetimes that make us who and what we are today, all the good and bad things. If you're an extremely talented person in the arts, well, you've developed that over many, many lifetimes. If you're somebody who has a tremendous amount of problems and difficulties with money, well, that's because you've misused money, which is energy, in previous lifetimes. So what we're going to talk about is how to uncover these past lives and make that positive change so that we no longer have to have those chains that are dragging us down, and we can live a more peace-filled, creative, inspired, loving, kind life.
So we mentioned that Inarius is an interdimensional science, and that can sound kind of overwhelming, but basically what that means is that this whole physical world and seeing ourselves as physical beings, that's an illusion, and that has been taught in previous religions like Buddhism, for example, and the Indian philosophies very much so. And that's because, as Tracy mentioned, everything is energy. And uncovering that energy waveform that is stored in our psychic anatomy and is causing the malformation expressing in the physical, that's what past life therapy is all about. So when we say we're studying interdimensional energy, okay, there's more than one dimension. Well, our true self lives in the higher dimensions, the fourth, fifth, and beyond. We have a higher self. Everyone has a higher self. And that's what we're developing. And the wonderful thing is that when you have a recognition of a past life and you really accept it, and truly that you were responsible for whatever happened and is re-expressing in a not so positive way in your life in the present, that actually is a spiritual healing because it actually changes the energy waveforms. So it's a permanent healing. So there's no longer a negative bias to it. There's a positive bias because it's balanced or polarized, we called it, with your learning. And that becomes part of your higher self. So literally with past life therapy, you're recreating yourself, your psychic self, and you're rebuilding and creating your higher self. And eventually, you will no longer have to reincarnate in a physical body to learn these lessons over and over again. You can speed up your progression and can live on the spiritual world instead of just attending the schools in between lifetimes. And that's what our spiritual guides and teachers, that's the path that they've taken. They've lived on these physical worlds, they've learned the lessons, they understand these energy principles, they can conceive them, they can live through their concept of them on these higher planes. And they are the ones who are truly the teachers and the guides for all of us, and are there for us constantly when we make that attunement or alignment with our higher self. And they help in this process of uncovering our past lives. Because we don't have a developed higher self yet, we don't truly have the ability to just see these pictures on our own. So they're working with us before we incarnated in our sleep state. And when we accept that, we have responsibility. That's a key premise. There's no victims. A responsibility to something that's happening in our present life. They actually can project that healing energy along with the picture of exactly what happened in the past, whether you see the picture or you mentally conceive it in your higher mental self while you're awake, in your sleep state. It comes in a variety of ways for people. Often when I let go of whatever situation I'm going around with, because if I'm trying, you can't figure it out with conscious mind, because if you're upset about something, you're at a lower frequency plane. And so how are you going to make that connection with the higher spiritual teachers? So when I changed my consciousness and tuned it up to a higher level, and what we do often with that is we study the text, because they carry this higher frequency energy along with the words. Or maybe I'm doing something I really enjoy doing that I'm totally not consciously aware of what I was going around with, then the information will pop in. Sometimes it's when I'm driving in the car. So it's a natural process. It's something that everyone can do. It's not special to be psychic. Everyone is psychic. It's just to what level you are, what channel, and what we're trying to do is tune up to the higher channels. So I'm going to give the mic back to Tracy.
So one of the things that we do is we have several tools that we work with to discover our past lives. And first and foremost is the study and raising your frequency. And we study in various texts, but really it can be anything that helps you to calm your mind and to help you to relax and let that conscious mind go aside. Now we don't do this with hypnotherapy, we don't do this with meditation. It can be as simple as Celeste said, something like being aware of your dreams and getting insight through your dreams. Well, one of the tools that we use is called the journal approach to past life therapy. And we actually, how many people keep a journal? Several people already. Well, it's a wonderful tool to help you to discover what are the thoughts, feelings, emotions, reactions that you're going around with on a day-to-day basis. Because if you really keep track of what's coursing through your consciousness, you'll start to see that, oh my gosh, there's a lot of stuff that goes through there, and some of it's not so good, and I can't believe I get angry at this person all the time. Why do I get angry at this person? What is it that, every time I see them or they look at me a certain way, it just irks me and rings a bell within me that I feel sick to my stomach. I don't like that person. Well, when you keep a journal, it helps you to see that and to track and to become more objective with yourself. Because even though it may look like it's that other person that's causing you, because that boss that you have is a jerk and they give you assignments you can never get done and they don't give you enough time to complete them, or whatever that situation is, the journal helps you to objectify it and to raise your frequency by, oh my gosh, there's something I keep having the same reaction over and over again, the same emotional reaction. Or it may be a fear that you have. You may be fearful of being in crowded places and you forget about it, but every time you get in a crowded place, you start to get claustrophobic and you want to get out of there and you can't wait to get out of there. Well, there's a reason why that fear will keep resurfacing. And when you keep track of these thoughts and reactions and emotions in a journal, it helps you to see what it is. It helps you to gain insight. And as you raise your frequency and relax that conscious mind and align to your higher self and to these spirit guides, we call them the Brothers of Light, but they're angels. Everybody knows them by a lot of different names. But these people who are projecting information will help you to start to get insight and to see pictures of a past life that's causing that fear or emotional reaction. And I'm going to share a past life recognition that I had several years ago. My husband, who is on the camera, Kevin, and I are both students of Unarius, wonderful person. And about 10 years ago, we purchased a sailboat with another couple. I love being on water. All my life, I swam, canoed, kayaked, lived on a lake. I just have surrounded myself by water, loved being near water. Well, we bought the sailboat, a 26-foot sailboat, and I'd taken sailing in high school, but didn't do very good at it, and I have since found out why. And with this other couple he was a very good sailboat person, driver, sailor. I can't remember what they're called. And Kevin is too. And what would happen is we'd go out on this sailboat, and when we were in any type of high wind and the boat would start to tip over, which they do, and this was a very safe boat, had a really long keel, my eyes would light up like saucers, and I had this fear come in me that I never knew I had. And I was just, oh my gosh, how come I am so fearful? Well, this went on. We had the sailboat for a couple years, and it was always when I was sailing with Kevin. When I was with Dennis, the experienced sailor, although Kevin's experienced, it wasn't that bad, but I would still be fearful. Well, I started using my journal and writing in my journal and saying, what is it? I'm fearful of this. Why am I fearful? I love to sail. I love being on the water. I'm having a fantastic time. Where's this fear coming from? Well, conscious mind can say, well, I drowned in a past life. That makes sense. If you have a fear like that, obviously I drowned in a past life. But it wasn't changing anything. And that was on a conscious mind level. And then my husband started getting frustrated because he's, Tracy, you're a student of past life therapy and you can't figure out why you still have this fear and this reaction. Come on, get a hold of this. And it still went on and went on and went on. So finally, about 2 years after we had the sailboat, we went sailing, came home, and I laid down and I took a nap, and when I woke up in what's called hypocognic state, where you're kind of in between that twilight zone where you're not really asleep, but you're not really awake, but you kind of, I'm sure everybody knows what that is. Well, as I was lying there in that state of mind, very calm and relaxed, I had a picture flash in, and I saw myself drowning in a past life. And it was very real. And I was on a boat, and the boat capsized, and I saw some people not drowning and staying on the surface, but I didn't know how to swim or whatever it was that happened. And I saw myself physically going underwater and looking up and seeing people on the surface and knowing I was dying. And I had tremendous fear. I was just so fearful that that experience that I had was very, very real. Well, what I realized that when I woke up and went, oh my gosh, I know what it is. I didn't have an understanding of a continuity of life in that lifetime. I thought that was the end. So when I went over in that lifetime, I had that tremendous fear. And as Celeste talked about, that energy was impinged within my psychic anatomy and rang in every time I saw the sailboat tip over when I was on it, because I was reattuned to that feeling that I had of, oh my gosh, I'm going to die, going over, drowning, feeling, that tremendous fear and having that. So after that, I had that awareness, and I told Kevin, I can't believe it. I think I really know why I've been so fearful of sailing. Well, what happens quite often is when you have an attraction or a pull to do something, which we did to go sailing, once you have a recognition and a change, you no longer have that pull, and the cycles change because energy changes. It's constantly in movement. What happened was I told Kevin my awareness, and I'm like, yeah, that makes sense. I really believe that. You can tell it was a sincere healing for me. Well, about 2 weeks later, we went sailing with our friends, and we were, down by the boat, and we shared the monthly slip fee for the boat, and we had both decided, but didn't say anything to them. You know what? We're okay if we don't have a sailboat anymore. The cycle's over. We learned what we need to learn from it, because that's really what life is all about, the lessons that we learn. And it's okay if we just let the sailboat go. But again, we didn't say anything to our friends. We're with them for about an hour, and they turned around and they looked at us and said, you two don't seem like you're very interested in the boat anymore. And we have somebody who's interested in buying it out if you want to let it go. And we just looked at each other and went, well, yeah, that sounds pretty good. So that was it. We let the sailboat go, and the fear of sailing is not there anymore. And most important was the lesson I learned, which is why I had that tremendous fear.
It's a great example, isn't it? Most people can probably relate to. I think a lot of people have a fear of water. Tracy mentioned being aware of your thoughts, and that is really key, because when we just go about our daily life, and particularly how all of us are so busy nowadays, and multitasking and wired in looking at iPhones or smartphones all the time, we often don't pay attention to that stream of consciousness, and we're not aware of our thoughts. And a good exercise to figure this out, and I did it for the first time probably about 24 years ago and was quite shocked, is to just carry a little notebook around or record it or whatever, and every hour on the hour I would remember to be aware of what my thought was and not to filter it. And I would write it down and I would go, oh my gosh, I thought I was really a positive-minded person, and look at these thoughts that I have. And I'm thinking, well, no wonder my life has, you know, problems and things aren't going always as well as I want them to, because it's true. You know, I've got some things that I've done in my past. I didn't understand energy then, and at the time I may have thought what I was doing was a positive thing, or, you know, if I got in a fight with my neighbor and went over and beat him up or killed him even, in those days and age, that might have been okay, but not okay now, right? So I became aware of all these thoughts. So what we do is we kind of naturally then develop that ability. While you're doing whatever, you're aware of that stream of consciousness, and writing it down is really helpful because it starts to show patterns, particularly if there's a certain situation going on in your life, and you can start to pin down, you know, what environment am I in. And like Tracy said, she determined it was with her husband and not with the other fellow when they went selling. So you begin to paint the picture of the past, but that's by focusing on the present, because those same thoughts and emotions that you have now are a reflection of the same thoughts and emotions you had in a previous lifetime. So if you get really upset at yourself or at someone, and in your mind you're thinking, you know, I want to kill that person, that's likely the thought that you had in a former lifetime, and you may have actually carried that out. And often the people that we attract to us now that are closest to us, they're not strangers. Our family, our friends, our relatives, our coworkers, those are people that we've had many lifetimes with, and in different roles, and those roles change. Like this time I might be the daughter, but in a previous lifetime I might have been the mother in my relationship with my current mother. And we have incurred situations with them that created karma or these negations in our psychic. And so now we'll get questions after we're done, thank you. And now what we have is the opportunity to turn that around as a lesson. And that's in particular what a lot of us as students have realized with each other and with family and friends. And I can relate one situation with my father. My father had cancer, and I knew I had some involvement with that. He had a rare tumor in his saliva glands. And he survived the cancer, but he had such a strong new form of radiation treatment that in about 7 years it weakened his heart, and he eventually went over, and he was about 65, and it wasn't a very good quality of life for him after he had the cancer, because his saliva glands never functioned right again. He couldn't really fully open his mouth, but he learned a whole lot through the experience. So see, there's always a positive side. Even when someone suffers, they're learning lessons. And what I realized, I had a growth underneath the underside of my tongue. It was the little ulva, the ridge, and it was sticking out about this far. Thought I had a sore throat for about 3 weeks. And I looked in the mirror and I was alarmed, and it kind of looked like a little dagger. And what I recognized is that I'd have a previous lifetime where a couple hundred years ago, and again, more violence in that time, believe it or not, than now, and I'd actually stabbed my father in the throat with a dagger. And when I recognized that and really accepted it, and I'd gone to the doctor, I had been told, oh, it's probably not cancerous, but we should probably do a biopsy, and I didn't have that done, and came home and was really writing in my journal trying to understand this. And when I had that and thought, well, I may have cancer, and then it wasn't intellectual. If it affected me, you start to feel the emotions with it, and understanding all my father had gone through. And I had great remorse. And within 2 or 3 days, that growth had gone down halfway, and within a week it was totally gone. I never went back to the doctor, because it was really a reflection of what had happened from past lifetimes in my psychic that was manifesting in my physical. Because your physical body is just a reflection of what's stored in your tape library, we call it, or these energy waveforms in your psychic. So to me, that was a really concrete example of healing, because it was so graphic in a physical sense. And a wonderful thing was that my father was already on the other side, but I knew he was in the spiritual schools, and he and I were still working out this past lifetime together. And a wonderful example I had of that is after he went over, there was some dispute among the family with the will. You know how that goes in families. And my husband and I were out camping in the desert. It was in the spring, and we actually hadn't gotten a good night's sleep because we'd been stupid and set up our big tent in what's called a wash. It's like a canyon, and the wind comes down the thing and whistles, and at the end when it got to our tent, it would just rattle it and make all this noise. And I'm not a morning person, and I woke up probably about sunrise, 6 o'clock, and I felt absolutely fantastic. My husband, meanwhile, was a grump because he hadn't slept all night. Sort of like, what's going on with you? And what I remembered is I had a dream, and in the dream, it looked like it was a letter that had to do with the will. And I don't remember all that it said, but what I remembered was that it was a message from my father from the other side, and it said, I love you. And my dad could never tell me that. He didn't grow up in that kind of family, and he had a really hard time with it. And that was the healing force.